A routine court hearing in New Mexico erupted into wild chaos when apparently family members of a murder victim charged at the accused killer, sparking an all-out brawl that left spectators stunned, security scrambling, punches flew, chairs were swung. It took a drawn taser to finally restore order. What triggered this explosive courtroom clash? Well, I'll tell you what, I'm going to speak with retired Judge Matthew Sciarrino to get his take on all of this. Welcome to Sidebar, presented by Law&Crime. I'm Jesse Weber. A typical day in court quickly spiraled into chaos when a brawl erupted during a hearing out in New Mexico. What should have been a routine legal proceeding descended into this wild, unpredictable fight between an accused killer and the reported family members of a victim that he is charged with murdering, leaving courtroom spectators stunned, security scrambling to regain control. The scene unfolded just before 9:30 a.m. Mountain Time on January 31st when two men, 40-year-old Carlos Lucero and 51-year-old Pete Yassi, allegedly charged across the courtroom during a hearing for 21-year-old murder suspect Alexander Segura Ortiz. Now, the reporting indicates that Lucero was there because Ortiz is accused of killing his niece, Aliana Farfan, who was Ortiz's ex-girlfriend. Now, it's interesting with Yassi because NBC News has reported that this might have been Farfan's stepfather. We couldn't independently confirm that, but it appears that he might be a family member of some sort. Now, Lucero, in fact, later told police that the murder charge against Ortiz was the reason he went after him that day. We will get into that a little bit more. And I want to dive into what we've seen in this footage because it's absolutely stunning and incredible. But first, I want to bring on a special guest. We have with us retired New York City Judge Matthew Sciarrino. Thank you so much for coming on. It's good to see you again.
Likewise. Good to see you, Jesse.
Now, as a former judge, what is going through your mind when you're seeing this absolute mayhem play out inside the courtroom? And we will do a play-by-play of everything that goes down, but just initial impressions about seeing something like this happen in a courtroom.
There's two competing things that you have to deal with as a judge when something like that happens. The security and my court officers have trained us that the best thing that we can do when an absolute melee breaks out is to get out of the courtroom so that they don't have to deal with protecting us and that they're clear to do what they need to do with the audience and the audience members. That being said, the natural reaction of most of us that wear black robes and that sit in the highest seat in the courtroom is to take charge. So you do have to kind of weigh those and weigh the situation. And I have unfortunately had these type of situations break out in my courtroom, and they can happen, although I have to say it's very, 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 very rare. And I'm always amazed at how wonderful the court officers in New York State handle those situations.
Can you elaborate on what happened in your courtroom? By the way, was it ever directed towards you? Did you ever feel any kind of alarm?
One time there was a person who made the first initial steps to kind of rush the bench, and he was quickly stopped by my sergeant, who literally jumped a table to get in his way and to make sure that that he didn't get any closer than maybe 10, 15 feet. More often than not, it's directed to the defense attorney. Where there have been attacks. There was one headbutting incident where a defendant literally all of a sudden just turned towards his lawyer and smashed his head into his lawyer's head, and then was quickly also taken down by my court officers. And so most of the violence was at the person nearby, and that tends to be the defense attorney. Unfortunate for that defense attorney.
Yeah, actually, I think we did a whole sidebar on that once before about attorneys getting attacked by their clients. But let me ask you this. I'm actually surprised that you don't see it more often in terms of family members of victims of horrific crimes. When they look at the defendant, they don't try to do this more often. I mean, I remember it was a few years ago during what was a really, really big sentencing hearing. It was the Larry Nassar case when a father of one of the women, girls who was actually, I think all of his daughters or several of his daughters were sexually assaulted by Larry Nassar. He rushed towards him. It was a huge chaos that erupted into that courtroom. I'm surprised we don't see this more. Not saying it should happen, but I'm surprised we don't see it more where the victim's family members try to attack a criminal defendant.
Thankfully, it does not happen as much as people would think. I've certainly have had the situation where victims will wear T-shirts that say "Remember the name of the victim," that they'll hold up pictures of victims. Especially, we would see it in vehicular manslaughter, where it was some kind of drunk driving was the initial reason for the death of their loved one. With sexual abuse crimes, we would see it as well. But by and large, the victims' families were beyond respectful of the court and the decorum of the court, and kept it to those kind of silent protests.
Hey, real quick, let me just take a sidebar from Sidebar for a minute to let you guys know about something. So Morgan & Morgan's our incredible sponsor and partner, but they are also the official law firm partner of the UFC. And it makes total sense, right? Because fighting is in their DNA. Like the UFC fighters who bring their everything into the octagon, Morgan & Morgan's 1,000 attorneys bring their everything for their clients in courtrooms across America. And get this, right now, Morgan & Morgan is giving away 2 tickets to the Pereira versus Ankalaev fight in Las Vegas, plus $2,000. You can enter for your chance to win at www.morganufc.com or at the link in the description and pinned in the comments. Is it the responsibility of the judge to determine who is in that courtroom and who's not in that courtroom? In other words, if you are having a criminal defendant enter the courtroom, which they have to do, and if it's an emotional day, let's say it's a sentencing hearing, or let's say, it's a first appearance, does the judge say, you know what, I'm concerned about what this person is accused of doing. I'm concerned about having the family members there. I'm concerned about how close the family members will be in the gallery. Is that something the judge controls, and should the judge control it?
We start with the default that it's a 100% open courtroom. And until someone gives a reason why they should be removed from a courtroom, they have the absolute right to be in that courtroom. If it's going to be a particularly, for verdicts and for sentencing, as a general rule in New York, whenever you're taking a verdict, so whenever you're getting that first verdict, extra officers will come into my courtroom. And if there is a particular need that we feel, because there's maybe a lot of victims, family members there, we will have even more officers in the courtroom. And that show of force generally is enough to keep it down. Also, if there's a lot of people in the courtroom and there's going to be something, generally I would say a few words. I know this is going to be difficult. We're going to be doing this. I need you to, just remain calm. And generally, if you show enough control, those situations don't happen.
Yeah, I remember, I think it was the verdict in the Harvey Weinstein case. I was in court in New York, and there was more security than I had ever seen when that verdict, or I think it was the verdict, not the sentence, when it came down. It was really something to see. But now I want to go into what happened here and how things got so out of hand. So we have security camera footage that was obtained by Law&Crime. It captures the dramatic moment as the courtroom essentially explodes into chaos. We're going to break it down for you step by step. Now, to be clear, the video doesn't have sound, but you can see all the chaos unfold inside of the Bernalillo County District Court. So Ortiz is in an orange jumpsuit. He's standing next to his attorney at the podium. And if you look closely at the top left corner of the screen, you're going to see the moment when everything changes, because that is when Carlos Lucero appears to leap over the barrier, appears to make a straight beeline for Ortiz. The officer standing behind Ortiz tries to stop him, but it's too late. Lucero, Ortiz, they collide. You could allege that, you could basically say, it appears that Lucero seems to tackle Ortiz, sends both of the men crashing down to the floor in a heap. And just as things seem to be settling, it appears that here comes Pete Yassi, allegedly bursting through the barrier in a white shirt, jumping right into the mix. Things just keep escalating from there. You have a third person who enters the fray. That's apparently Ortiz's father, dressed in all black, walking up to the brawl, immediately throwing punches, or appears to be. And meanwhile, you have horrified family members in the gallery rush in to try and break things up. No use. The fight only intensifies. I'll tell you what. You see on tape one woman, what appears to be grabbing a folding chair, starts swinging it at the direction of both Ortiz and the officer trying to shield him. And to make things even crazier, you can just spot the other inmates in the courtroom who are there for their own hearings, just watching this madness unfold. And then finally, an officer pulls out what appears to be a taser in an attempt to regain control of the situation. But before things can calm down, it appears that Ortiz's father allegedly delivers a final blow, kicking Yassi right in the face. The moment the weapon comes out, everyone backs off. Officers rush in to handcuff Ortiz, Yassi, and Lucero, leading them out of the courtroom. And in the aftermath, you can see Yassi and Lucero wiping their faces with tissues, probably from injuries that they sustained during the brawl. And once things settle down, the remaining inmates are escorted out of the courtroom, and that's how the hearing ends, barely, even getting started. So, Matthew, your reaction to watching that unfold?
My reaction is initially that there did not seem to be enough other officers coming in to assist. In the New York State courtrooms, we have a mechanism where basically there are strategically located buttons within the courtroom that, if are pressed, you will see literally 10, 15, 20 officers from all of the surrounding courtrooms come into the courtroom that has the emergency to assist in making sure, A, that the courtroom is cleared, that there's kind of buffer set up so that other people can't be injured, and firm control of that courtroom is taken. To me, it did not seem that the court officers or the bailiffs in Albuquerque had enough of a presence to stop everything from happening. And I think they were very shocked and did not initially get over that shock until even more came, and then it escalated, and it escalated above that. So, with I think, not that violence doesn't happen. There was an incident in last week in New York City Supreme Court where there was a knifing in the hallway, and there has been a rise, especially with young people and gangs, of violence in the hallway as competing gangs are waiting for their respective cases to be called. And there have been more and more and more incidents in the hallways of the courtrooms in New York, resulting in many officers being hurt. And then you have a shortage of officers, which we've been facing for a very, very long time. And when other officers go out because of line of injury, there's even more of a shortage. So the hallways have become very, very dangerous in both the family courts and the New York State courts. But I think it's that overwhelming presence of officers that needs to come into wherever there's that kind of situation to take control. And that didn't seem to happen in the video that I saw.
And it's alarming for multiple reasons, right? You want officers to come in to stop the chaos, to stop the violence, make sure nobody gets hurt. But one of the people could actually grab a weapon off the officer. And then you're dealing with a whole different kind of situation. And talking about that, in the video, in your opinion, was the use or the potential use of that taser by the officer, that was a reasonable response to the situation? What other kind of ways could you respond? Would it be taking out a firearm of some kind? What are ways to de-escalate that? I mean, what was your take on that part?
Yeah, generally firearms, tasers, and firearms are last resort, and you don't want it to escalate to that point. There are batons and the batons that kind of elongate that can be brought out for such a situation to kind of move everyone away from the area. Luckily, I have never had the situation where firearms in any of my courtrooms had to be threatened to be used or unholstered. As a general rule, the officers that are handling the prisoners and that are brought into the courtroom they won't have guns, because you don't want the defendant to be able to take those guns from the officers. But the other officers in the courtroom generally do have firearms. Luckily, none of those ever had to be used in my courtroom. A taser, I can definitely see being used as that next escalation point, because it's generally something that someone who's unskilled won't be able to use anyway, and it's generally only going to be used to kind of diffuse the situation and to kind of end that particular person's ability to escalate even more to make the situation worse.
Let me ask you this. Where you have something like this happening, it's caught on video, broadcast widely, how would the judge, how should a judge approach public commentary on this and the press inquiries regarding this incident? What do they say after something like this?
As a general rule, that judge is now a witness, and that's one of the reasons why we're told to leave the bench as soon as possible. You're now a witness to all of the events that happened in the subsequent proceedings, so you don't want to comment at all with regards to same. Now, the videos I know are used, and whenever these kind of situations happen, the court officers and the security teams that deal with security in courthouses throughout the country, they all watch each other's videos when these kind of things happen as an example of, listen, be wary of this kind of thing happening so that you're better able to handle it.
So let me just lay out what happened here in the end. So you have Lucero and Yassi. They were both arrested at the scene. Both men were charged with battery on a peace officer and assault on a jail, respectively. And despite the severity of those charges, they were both released on their own recognizance, meaning they don't have to post bail, but they're going to have to return for future court appearances. Lucero, though, didn't come away from the fight unscathed. If you look at his mugshot, shows a swollen black and blue eye, scratches on his face, likely a result of the chaotic altercation. And Yassi kind of looks untouched in the booking photo. Both men, along with Ortiz's father, were taken to a hospital for treatment, but Ortiz's father, he wasn't charged in this incident, and this is despite allegedly getting involved in the scuffle and even kicking Yassi. I was surprised by that, Matthew, that Ortiz's father wasn't charged. Why do you think that is?
I think I likewise am surprised because initially you're going to almost charge everyone, and a lot of those cases I think are going to go away. I can almost guarantee that there'll be a civil lawsuit between the defendant and the family, that the victim's family. If for nothing else, it'll be something for him to do if he's convicted and a day out of jail to deal with the civil lawsuit. But there'll be civil lawsuits against the state for not protecting him sufficiently. There'll be civil lawsuits against Albuquerque as well for not protecting him. But I think because the father was the third person kind of into the melee and seemed to be trying to defend his son, I think the prosecutors felt that there was really not a case there because it was more of a clear defensive person type of case, and I have a feeling that the cases even the more, because clearly he was injured, but it will still be a very hard case for a prosecutor to be able to get a jury that's unsympathetic towards the victim's family. So while I don't see the cases necessarily going away instantaneously, it might at a grand jury proceeding, but I do down the road have a feeling that after the trial of the defendant is done, and depending if he's convicted or acquitted, then a decision will be made whether to pursue the case against the victim's family that jumped the rail.
So here's the question, right? What happened? Who provoked this, right? Well, it likely wasn't just some random outburst, because Carlos Lucero reportedly told deputies, "He killed my niece like a coward. It was worth every moment." Now, Matthew, a couple things here. Does this even go to trial with these charges that these men are facing? It's caught on tape. There's a lot of witnesses. I don't know what the defense is. Or is there some sort of legal defense? Like, you can understand the emotion of this. I understand it. Doesn't mean he should do it, but I can understand. Is that work to a defense? He's not going to deny that he did it, right? But it makes you wonder, where does this case go with them? And do they have any sort of justification whatsoever for what happened here?
Yeah, I think clearly, this wasn't, it did not appear to be a spur of the moment type of decision. So I'm going to think that the victim's family kind of knew what he was doing when he did the attack and had planned to do something along those lines. I don't necessarily see this going to trial. It would be either, in my mind, a plea, at most probation, and more than likely after the defendant's trial, if he's acquitted or if he's convicted. You really don't have a defense, but it still will be a one of those type of cases where if I'm a defense attorney, I'm basically arguing for some kind of jury nullification, and although that's something that courts won't necessarily recognize, it is something that would happen in this type of case, I think.
Now, let me just lay out a little bit more about Ortiz and all this. So, as we mentioned earlier, Lucero was there because of his niece, Aliana Farfan. And she was allegedly murdered by Ortiz in January of 2024. According to a criminal complaint, Ortiz gunned down Aliana inside her apartment on January 11th, 2024. That's the allegation. And after the shooting, Ortiz reportedly fled through her bedroom window wearing a ski mask and a black hoodie. The officer describes in the criminal complaint hearing the recording of a 911 phone call that was made where a woman can be heard saying, "He killed her. His name, he goes by Draco. He just came inside and ran. He shot my cousin. Please come by, please." Now, police learned that Draco was apparently a nickname for Alexander Ortiz. And when officers arrived on scene, they find this broken window in the bedroom. They saw Aliana lying face up. Live ammunition was also discovered, along with what appeared to be a bloody handprint. Aliana's cousin, who was staying with her at the time, heard or allegedly heard Ortiz and Aliana arguing. The dispute reportedly centered around a test that Ortiz had taken at a health clinic. He then heard a gunshot, went into Aliana's room, noticing the bedroom window was open and Ortiz was nowhere to be found. A friend of Aliana's cousin told police that she heard the gunshot, saw Aliana inside the bedroom bleeding from her nose and eyes. And investigators believe that Ortiz had this abusive relationship with Aliana and that he was angry with her the day that he allegedly killed her. According to a City of Albuquerque news release, Aliana allowed friends to stay with her in the apartment because she feared being alone. A neighbor of Aliana's told police that on the day of the incident, he heard a man yelling, a woman screaming for help, saying that the man was threatening to choke her. He also told police that the apartment's management company had to replace the windows of Aliana's apartment 3 to 4 times. Now, an arrest warrant was served and Ortiz was charged with the murder of Aliana Farfan on January 27, 2024. But this doesn't end there. Why? Because detectives still hadn't located Ortiz after he allegedly took off from the apartment, and they wouldn't find him for almost another month. But while police were searching for him, detectives identified him as a suspect in the murder of another woman, Nicole Maldonado, who was killed at a grocery store on January 17th. So that's almost a week after Aliana's murder. Police were able to review surveillance footage, which reportedly showed Ortiz firing shots into a car outside the store. According to reporting from KOB4, Nicole was in the back seat of that car and later died from her injuries. The city of Albuquerque reported that police finally located Ortiz on February 21st, 2024, holed up in a residence near the grocery store. After barricading Ortiz inside the residence, police were able to take him into custody, but at the time of his arrest, he was only facing the murder charge for Aliana's death, while police were still investigating the supermarket shooting. And when detectives searched the residence, they apparently found parts of a .40 caliber handgun, an extended magazine, a 50-round drum magazine, Glock ammunition. These parts were later linked to the shooting outside the grocery store. So in addition to the murder charge that he's facing for Aliana's death, he is now facing a laundry list of charges in connection with Nicole's death: murder, attempted murder, conspiracy to commit murder, aggravated assault with a deadly weapon, tampering with evidence. Matthew, those are 2 big criminal cases and charges against him. Just your overall thoughts on what he's facing right now as we put a bow on this case.
Yeah, I don't see him seeing the light of day in Albuquerque for ever. In all honesty, with the justice system out in that area of the world. So I think he probably will be in prison for the rest of his life, assuming he's convicted on both of these matters, which is why I say I think he'll be suing civilly Albuquerque and the others, because this will be his days out of the jail system in order to participate in his civil cases.
Well, look, he is presumed innocent, and right now in the courtroom episode, he's actually a victim of what happened. So
he is, and another reason why I don't think that there will necessarily be a case against the victim's father that stands up, because as a victim, he's not going to be the greatest witness that has taken the stand.
Yeah, and look, these are some very serious charges. They appear to have a lot of evidence against him right now, but we'll see where that case progresses as well. But following the courtroom brawl, I'll tell you this, Ortiz's rescheduled hearing is now set for Friday, and hopefully nothing like we just saw will happen again.
You could be guaranteed that there'll be a lot more officers in that courtroom than that.
Oh, I imagine so. I imagine so. Matthew, Sharina, thank you so much for coming on. Appreciate you taking the time.
Thank you, Jesse.
And that's all we have for you right now here on Sidebar, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us. And as always, please subscribe on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you should get your podcasts. I'm Jesse Weber. I'll speak to you next time.